The old house stood at the end of a desolate street, its windows covered in grime, the once white walls now stained with time and neglect. Neighbors had whispered about it for years, but no one dared to go near it. Strange noises could be heard at night, the howling, the cries, the scratching. But it wasn't until the awful stench filled the air that someone finally called the authorities. The call for help. It was a chilly morning when Officer Rachel Carter received the call. The report was vague, but disturbing, a case of extreme animal hoarding. Rachel, a seasoned animal welfare officer, had seen her fair share of cruelty, but something about this case unsettled her. She immediately contacted the local shelter and rescue teams, knowing they would need all the help they could get. Within an hour, animal control officers, volunteers, and law enforcement arrived at the scene. The team braced themselves as they knocked on the door. No response. They knocked again. Then, from inside, a weak voice called out, "Go away, they're mine! They need me!" The voice belonged to an elderly woman, Mrs. Eleanor Fields, a former dog breeder who had fallen into deep despair after her husband's passing. Unable to let go of the animals she loved, she kept taking in more and more strays, convinced she was their only hope. But her love had turned into something tragic. The shocking discovery. When the authorities finally entered the house, they were met with a scene out of a nightmare. The floor was covered in filth, the air thick with ammonia. Dogs, small, large, young, old, were crammed into tiny cages, some barely able to move. Others roamed freely, their ribs visible beneath matted fur. The scent of decay was overwhelming. Rachel covered her mouth and stepped forward. "We need to get them out now." The team sprang into action, carefully lifting frail bodies, soothing the terrified animals. Some of the dogs wagged their tails weakly, desperate for human touch. Others cowered in corners, too traumatized to move. One officer found a litter of puppies hidden under an overturned table, their tiny bodies trembling. The rescue mission. It took hours to get every last dog out of that house. The rescue team worked tirelessly, gently placing them in carriers and rushing them to waiting vans. Veterinarians were on site, immediately administering aid to the ones in critical condition. Mrs. Fields was taken into custody, though it was clear she was as much a victim as the dogs were. She wept as she watched them being taken away, begging for them to stay. "They need me," she kept whispering. But Rachel knew the truth. These dogs needed saving from her. A new beginning. Over the next few weeks, the rescued dogs were treated, rehabilitated, and placed in foster homes. Some were too weak to survive, their little bodies giving out after years of neglect. But many showed resilience, their spirits unbroken despite the horrors they endured. One dog, a golden retriever named Lucky, had been found locked in a tiny crate, unable to stand. After weeks of care, he found a loving family who showered him with the affection he had never known. Stories like Lucky's gave hope to the rescuers who had witnessed the darkest side of humanity that day. As for Mrs. Fields, she was placed under psychiatric care, diagnosed with severe hoarding disorder and depression. Though she had harmed the animals she thought she was protecting, the legal system chose compassion over punishment. She was given the help she so desperately needed. The bigger picture. Animal hoarding is more than just a crime. It's a symptom of deeper psychological issues. This case shed light on the importance of mental health awareness and stricter regulations on animal welfare. Thanks to the tireless efforts of the rescue team, 50 dogs were given a second chance at life. The house at the end of the street was eventually torn down, but the memory of what happened there remained. It served as a reminder that love, when left unchecked and unbalanced, can become dangerous. And that sometimes the hardest part of helping is knowing when to let go.